Hello, it's Vicar Ezekiel Grabau, and today is Friday of Lent 5, and we are beginning a new hymn today, No Tramp of Soldiers' Marching Feet, which is LSB 444. And you'll notice if you look in your upper left corner in the LSB that we are technically no longer in Lent. Well, we are still in Lent, but we're in a specific season of Lent, Holy Week. And as the time of this recording and the time that you'll be listening to this, it is not Holy Week yet. But this hymn is one of those hymns that is dedicated to Holy Week, especially to Jesus' triumphal entry, which we'll hear about in a couple of days when we hear the Palm Sunday procession on Passion Sunday. So we're sort of looking forward to that a little bit. And by the time we get to that day, we'll have looked at a little bit of the description of the triumphal entry. So think of this as sort of preparing us for the coming Sunday. But let's take a listen to the very first stanza of this hymn. This very first stanza sets up for us a very important theme. So Timothy Dudley Smith, who is the writer of this hymn, is an Anglican priest, Anglican bishop, I believe. And throughout this hymn, he's going to be working with this theme of irony. And unfortunately, I have to define what irony is. This is a moment that I get to put on my English major cap for a moment. When we're talking about irony, we've sort of got that kind of mixed up. There was a song put out a bit ago that talks about irony and isn't it ironic, and sort of confused what we mean when we say irony. So irony, especially dramatic irony, is where something is going on, but the people in the midst of what's going on don't really understand what's happening. But we, the audience, viewing it, do know what's going on. So an example of dramatic irony would be in a play. You're watching the play Hamlet by Shakespeare, and maybe Hamlet says something about impending death, and you know, to take a silly example, Hamlet I maybe shouldn't have brought up because that's an actual play, and I can't make up lines from Hamlet. But if in the play Hamlet, who famously ends with Hamlet dying at the very end, spoilers for a very, very old play, if Hamlet were to say something along the lines of, oh, I hope I'm going to live forever, that would be irony, because we know that he's not going to live forever. In fact, he's going to die within this play. So irony is something is happening, but as it's happening, what's going on doesn't reflect what we know. We know what's actually going on and what's actually going to happen, but everyone else does not. So this very first stanza is describing Jesus' triumphal entry, but from a negative perspective, saying all the things that aren't there. We'll get a more positive description in our next stanza, but for now, what we hear is this. No tramp of soldiers' marching feet, with banners and with drums. No sound of music's martial beat. The King of Glory comes. So the irony here is that in Jesus' triumphal entry, it is, in fact, the King of Glory who is coming. And yet his reception is not appropriate. He's not being received as a king. There's no parade of soldiers as a conquering king would receive as coming home. There's no banners and drums. There's no sound of music's martial beat. Instead, he's coming in lowly and riding on a donkey. Of course, we'll hear more about that in stanza 2. And this term, the King of Glory, is a really, really wonderful thing. So it's a reference actually to Psalm 24, where we have this description of the King of Glory. Who is the King of Glory? I'm actually going to grab this one and read it to you. I have bookmarked another one that I'm going to read to you, but I'm going to find this one because this is a lovely one. And Psalm 24 is typically associated with Advent and the coming of the King in his incarnation. But there's also a pretty clear connection to Jesus' coming to his people here in the triumphal entry. So let me read the second half here of Psalm 24. This starts with verse 7. Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty, the Lord, mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O gates, and lift them up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. So you notice there's a great deal of interpretive power here with Psalm 24. When we say that Jesus is the King of glory, we're saying that he is the Lord. He is God himself come to his people. And there's plenty of prophecies about that. We're going to read another one of that with our second half. But this is the outcry that doesn't appear. We'll see the kind of acclamation that Jesus does receive, but he's not received as God himself. Doesn't receive that kind of martial welcome. And notice again with Psalm 24, the description is of a conquering king, one who is won in battle. Mighty is the Lord. And Jesus has indeed come to conquer. He has come to defeat sin, death, and the devil. That's the purpose for which he has come. But he doesn't receive an appropriate martial response. He doesn't have this parade of soldiers following after him. Again, he comes humbly. Let's hear the second half of this first stanza. To greet what pomp of kingly pride, no bells in triumph ring, nor city gates swing open wide. Behold, behold your king. Line 5 is the point in this stanza that the irony reaches its highest pitch, because what we look at in Jesus is not, in fact, a king in pomply pride, but a humble Lord, one who has come to serve, as we'll talk again more in the coming stanzas of this hymn. And in fact, there's references here throughout this hymn to the prophecy of Zechariah in chapter 9, verse 9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he. Humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So Jesus doesn't come in kingly pride, but in humility. And so the humility that he comes in, and the reception that he receives doesn't correspond to the truth that we know, that this is the King of glory, the one who is bringing righteousness and salvation to his people. And yet he's not received as the great king that he is. And this is this great irony that is going on. The bells in triumph. That's a good one to point out, because this is, again, it's a symbol along with this sort of picture of the soldiers, the absence of the soldiers. Bells would ring in triumph for a king who's come back and won in the great battle. The bells would ring in the town to announce the coming of the great king who has won in the great war. But those bells don't ring, not in triumph. First, because the triumph hasn't happened yet. Jesus hasn't yet defeated sin, death, and the devil on the cross. But also, the people are not receiving him as the triumphant king, as the Lord himself. And we have this last line, behold, behold your king. And again, that calls back to Zechariah, where he is saying, behold, your king is coming to you. So all of this is sort of ringing together in this picture of irony. And I'd also like to point out to you, also aiding this irony is the tune itself. So you'll notice that this is, if you look in the bottom left corner here, next to the word music, it says English adapted and harmony, Ralph Vaughan Williams. Ralph Vaughan Williams is a great English composer who did a lot of work. And a lot of what he would do is he would take some familiar folk tunes and he would sort of arrange them into a new form that sort of carried the weight of poetry, of a hymn stanza. So this tune is called Kingsfold, And it's got an old history. It's an old folk tune that's sort of been adjusted by Ralph Vaughan Williams to sort of fit in here. But it fits so perfectly in with this particular hymn, because you have this irony that there's no martial beat, no sound of drums, no soldiers marching, but the tune sounds like this sort of martial beat. This you can almost hear the marching of the soldiers in the way that the tune sort of repeats its notes and crescendos and decrescendos and repeats its notes again. It's very repetitive. And that will aid with some of the theming of the text itself as well. But there's this sort of irony where we're hearing the music and we're thinking, yeah, this is a martial event. And yet the words are telling us, no, Jesus is not coming as a conquering king with all these soldiers behind him. He's coming humbly. And so it's helping along this sort of irony and sort of giving it this force in the music as well. And that's part of what makes this a really beautiful hymn, is the combination of the text and the tune. But we're going to hear even more, not just about this hymn, but about the way that everything fits together and this theme of irony that's present throughout the hymn as we continue on. God's blessings.